The retired Marine colonel stopped 3 feet away from me, lowered his champagne glass, and stared as if he had just seen a ghost. "Colonel Griffin?" he asked. The string quartet kept playing behind him. Nearly 100 guests filled the Ashworth estate, dressed in silk, linen, and the kind of quiet wealth that never needed to announce itself. My father stood near the terrace doors with one hand wrapped around a drink he had not touched. My sister Lauren was beside her fiancé, smiling too brightly, trying to pretend the evening had not been on the edge of disaster for 2 days. I had come in a pale blue dress, not my uniform. I wanted to be invisible. The Marine extended his hand. "Ma'am? I read the citation connected to the evacuation operation last year. I never expected to meet you here. It's an honor." The people nearest us stopped talking. My father's face changed. 6 days earlier, he had told me there was no room for me at this party. The message arrived at 6:47 on a Tuesday evening while I was still beneath the West Wing, finishing work in an office where most of the files could not leave the room. "Don't come to your sister's engagement party. The guest list is already full. No apology, no explanation, just 2 sentences from the man who raised me, removing me like an error on a seating chart." I read the message 3 times. Then I looked down at the badge clipped beside my uniform jacket. Colonel Savannah Griffin. For 3 years, I had served as a senior military advisor in support of the National Security Council. My work involved operations and decisions I was not permitted to discuss outside secure rooms. Even inside my own family, I used vague phrases like government assignment or policy work. They never asked for more. To my parents, I was simply the unmarried daughter who worked in Washington. I was 46, had no children, and had apparently failed every measurement my father understood. Success, in his mind, looked like Lauren. My younger sister sold luxury real estate in Charlotte. She was warm, social, beautiful without trying, and engaged to Bradford Ashworth III, whose family owned enough commercial property to have a building named after them before he turned 35. When Lauren announced the engagement, my father opened a bottle of champagne and said, "Now that is what I call marrying well." I heard the celebration through the phone from 3 states away. I was happy for her, truly. What hurt was not that Lauren was loved loudly. It was that I had spent most of my life being loved quietly enough to be mistaken for not being loved at all. I had already requested leave for the party. I had bought the blue dress. I had chosen something modest because the unspoken rule in our family had always been simple: do not outshine Lauren. I never wanted to. I only wanted a place in the room. I sat in my car beneath the White House for almost 20 minutes after receiving my father's text. I considered calling him, but I already knew how the conversation would go. He would tell me the Ashworths had strict numbers. He would say I was making it personal. He would somehow turn my hurt into proof that I was difficult. So I typed one word: understood. I did not cry. Military service had taught me that the body sometimes becomes calm when the wound is too familiar. I had felt that same stillness during incoming fire, during casualty reports, during phone calls that began with, "We need you to make a decision." I put the phone down and returned to work. The next evening, Lauren called. "How could you do this to us?" she demanded, but her voice sounded frightened rather than angry. "Do what? Don't pretend you don't know." I nearly ended the call. Then she explained. A national political magazine had published photographs from a White House ceremony honoring military advisors connected to a classified operation. One photograph showed me standing near 2 senior officials. Beneath it was a caption: Colonel Savannah Griffin, Senior Military Advisor to the National Security Council. My father had found the magazine while sitting in his recliner. According to Lauren, he stared at the photograph for several minutes, then began calling everyone he knew who had served in the military. He wanted someone to tell him whether the title was real. "He thinks you arranged it," Lauren said. "Arranged what?" "The article. The timing. He thinks you wanted to embarrass him because of the party." I laughed once, without humor. For 22 years, my father had ignored my promotions, skipped my ceremonies, and changed the subject whenever my career came up. Now that a stranger had printed one sentence about me, his first instinct was not pride or curiosity. It was suspicion. "I learned about the article 30 seconds ago," I told her. Lauren went silent. Then she said, "Nobody in this family knows what you do. Nobody ever asked." The truth about us had not begun with that magazine. It began when I graduated from West Point, and looked into the crowd for two people who were not there. My father said the drive was too long and conflicted with one of Lauren's cheerleading competitions. He told me the army would still be there next year, but my sister's moment would not. So I stood on that field in dress gray, while other cadets embraced their parents, and I learned one of the most useful and damaging lessons of my life: how to act as if absence did not hurt. They missed my commissioning. They missed the ceremony when I made major. They did not see the silver oak leaves pinned to my shoulders when I became a lieutenant colonel. My father liked to say, "The military doesn't build families, Savannah. It breaks them apart." He said it as though my service had taken me from him, rather than his indifference pushing me toward the first institution that judged me by my discipline instead of my usefulness at home. He never knew about the convoy I redirected in Iraq after intelligence suggested an ambush. 11 people came back because we changed course. He never knew about the field hospital I helped establish in Afghanistan, or the nights when helicopter rotors shook dust from the ceiling while medics worked until their hands trembled. He never knew about the bronze star wrapped in tissue paper inside a drawer in my apartment. I did not hide those things because I was ashamed. I hid them because you eventually stop bringing gifts to a house where no one opens the door. The morning after Lauren's call, my father arrived at the northwest gate of the White House without an appointment. He apparently believed he could walk into my office building, give my name to a receptionist, and demand a conversation. Instead, he spent nearly 40 minutes at security, while agents verified his identity, checked his information, and confirmed that Colonel Savannah Griffin did, in fact, work there. A scheduler named Priya came to my office just before noon. "Colonel," she said carefully, "your father is here." When I reached the visitor corridor, he was standing near a window in his good church jacket. He looked smaller than I remembered. A lieutenant colonel passed and said, "Good morning, ma'am." An NSC director nodded. "Colonel Griffin." Then a two-star general stopped long enough to thank me for a briefing from the previous week. My father tracked every greeting. I watched certainty leave his face one piece at a time. "I didn't know," he said when we were alone. "I had no idea this was real." There was an old version of me that wanted to rescue him. She wanted to say it was fine, that the work sounded more impressive than it was, and that he should not feel embarrassed. I let that version remain silent. "You never asked," I said. He did not argue. That was how I knew the sentence had reached him. "Come to the party," he said. "Please." I studied his face, wondering whether he wanted his daughter or simply needed the Ashworths to see that he had not deliberately hidden a decorated officer from them. "I'll think about it." 2 days later, Lauren called again. This time she was crying. The Ashworth family had seen the article. Bradford's mother, Constance, had asked Lauren about me in front of several friends. Lauren could not explain my position because she knew almost nothing about it. Constance interpreted that as secrecy. Bradford's father questioned whether our family had misrepresented itself. There was even talk of postponing the engagement announcement. My father was panicking. The silence he had built around me was now threatening the future he prized most. "I need you there," Lauren whispered. "Not for Dad, for me." I could have refused. Part of me wanted to. But Lauren had not created the wound between my father and me. She had benefited from it, yes, and she had rarely questioned it. But she was still my sister. So I said yes. I arrived at the estate on Saturday evening determined to draw no attention. For the first few minutes it worked. Then the retired Marine recognized me. After he shook my hand, a former Army surgeon approached. Then a naval officer whose commander had mentioned my name. None of them revealed classified details. They did not need to. Their tone was enough. Respect has a sound when it is genuine. It becomes quieter, not louder. Within 20 minutes, the social current of the party had shifted. Guests who had first treated me like an inconvenient relative began watching from a distance. Constance Ashworth approached and spoke to me with a warmth she had not shown when I entered. My father stood near the terrace doors, witnessing strangers offer me the curiosity he had withheld for decades. Then the Marine colonel asked a question that opened the room completely. "Were you the Griffin they called Northstar?" My hand tightened around my glass. That call sign had not been used publicly in years. Before I could answer, a silver-haired man beside the dessert table turned sharply. His name was General Marcus Hale, retired, a guest of Bradford's grandfather. He crossed the terrace slowly. "Who said Northstar?" he asked. The Marine pointed toward me. General Hale looked into my face, and for a moment I was 34 again, standing in a command tent under red lights while radio traffic broke apart around us. He removed his glasses. "Savannah Griffin," he said softly, "you brought my son home." The quartet kept playing for another few seconds, before one musician noticed the silence and lowered her bow. Every face turned toward us. I had known Hale's son as Captain Daniel Hale. During an operation in Afghanistan, his team had been cut off after an explosion disabled their primary route. Weather grounded the planned evacuation, communications were failing, and command was preparing for losses. I had coordinated an alternate extraction using a medical convoy, 2 local contacts, and a route most officers considered too uncertain. It was not heroic. It was the best option left. But it worked. Daniel and 5 wounded soldiers came home. General Hale faced the people around us. "My son has 3 children because this woman refused to accept that the map had no safe road," he said. "She found one." I wanted the moment to end. Recognition has always made me uncomfortable, especially when it arrives in a room where I came prepared to disappear. But my father needed to hear it, and perhaps I needed to stop protecting him from the truth. Constance asked, "Why has no one in the family ever mentioned this?" No one answered. My father lowered his eyes. Lauren looked at him, then at me, and something painful passed across her face. She understood that the silence surrounding my life had never been modesty alone. It had been erasure. My father found me 2 hours later on a stone bench at the edge of the garden. For once, he did not begin with an explanation. "I told people you did paperwork," he said. "When they asked what you did, I said you worked in an office. Filing, I think I said once." His jaw tightened. "I made you sound small." "Why?" He stared at the ground. "Because I didn't understand your life." My father believed women in uniform were trying to become something they weren't. I thought I was more modern than he was, but some of it stayed in me. He paused. "When you kept choosing the army, I decided you were rejecting the life I wanted for you. A husband, children, a home near us." He swallowed. "And when you succeeded at something I did not respect, I think I preferred to believe it wasn't real." It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. Lauren joined us and sat on the grass despite her cream dress. "I thought you didn't need us," she said. "You never complained. You never asked for anything." "That does not mean I needed nothing," she began to cry. "If you have ever been called strong because nobody noticed you were tired, you understand what that moment felt like. Some people do not abandon you all at once. They simply teach you, year after year, to stop expecting a chair at the table." My father reached for my hand, then stopped before touching it. "There is something at home," he said. "Something I should have shown you years ago." After the party, we drove to my parents' house. My mother met us at the door with red eyes, as though she already knew what he intended to do. In the back bedroom, my father pulled a plastic storage bin from the hall closet. Inside were dozens of envelopes arranged by year. I recognized my handwriting immediately. Letters from Fort Benning, Iraq, Afghanistan, Germany, Washington. Letters I had sent faithfully for more than a decade. Most were still sealed. "You never opened them," I said. He sat on the edge of the bed. "I opened the first few. You sounded confident, capable. You described a world I couldn't understand, and it frightened me. I felt as though you had become someone beyond my reach." He looked at the years stacked between us. "So I told myself I would read them when I was ready." His voice weakened. "I was never ready." I selected one from my first year of service and opened it. The paper had softened with age. I read aloud. "Dear Dad, I know this is not the life you pictured for me, but I am not running away from our family. I am running toward a version of myself I might one day be proud of. I do not need applause. I only hope that someday you will become curious about the life I am building. Love, Savannah." When I finished, my father covered his face with both hands. "I'm sorry," he said. "For the party. For the letters. For every ceremony I missed. I don't know how to repair 22 years, but I want to try." I did not tell him it was fine. It was not fine. Forgiveness should never require the wounded person to lie about the wound. But I stayed. We sat in that room until evening. My father did not demand forgiveness or defend himself. He opened the letters one by one. Sometimes he asked questions. Sometimes he simply listened. Before I left, he found an old photograph at the bottom of the bin. I was 23, newly commissioned, standing outside the barracks in my dress uniform. He carried it to the living room and hung it beside Lauren's formal portrait, which had occupied the wall alone for years. He stepped back. 22 years late, he said. But it belongs here. A photograph cannot undo neglect. An apology cannot recover missed ceremonies. We did not become a perfect family that night. But something changed because the truth was finally allowed into the room. In the weeks that followed, my father called me without asking to speak to someone else. He asked what he was allowed to know about my work. When I said I could not answer, he did not interpret the boundary as rejection. He simply asked about Washington, my team, and the parts of my life I could share. Lauren began reading the old letters with my permission. She apologized for every time she accepted my absence, without questioning who had arranged it. The following spring, she married Bradford. My father asked whether I would wear my dress uniform. Not to impress anyone, he said. I just want to see my daughter as she really is. So I wore it. Before the ceremony, he stood in the doorway and looked at the ribbons, the rank, and the years represented by things he could not fully understand. Then he saluted me. His form was imperfect, his hand trembled, but I returned it. For most of my life, I believed strength meant surviving without being seen. The army taught me how to remain calm under pressure, how to make decisions while afraid, and how to carry responsibility without applause. My family taught me something harder. Silence can protect your dignity, but it can also protect the people who refuse to know you. I no longer confuse forgiveness with pretending. I no longer make myself smaller so someone else can remain comfortable. And I no longer believe that wanting to be seen is weakness. Sometimes recognition comes from a general in a crowded garden. Sometimes it comes from a father opening a letter 22 years late. The important thing is that your worth existed before either of them named it. People may mistake your silence for weakness. Let them, if you must. But never mistake it yourself. And if this story felt familiar, tell me in the comments, would you have gone to the party after receiving that message? Subscribe for more stories about quiet strength, hidden sacrifice, and the moment truth finally enters the room.